Hey everybody, welcome to the channel. Hey guys, we're your hosts, Em and Jay, and today we're looking at issue 9 of Captain Marvel 2019. Carol finally starts asking questions and doing some detective work in this issue, which is really good to see, but this series would have worked better if this had been issue 3 instead of issue 9. It also brings up the previous series, The Life of Captain Marvel, but it really would have been better if they had introduced those plot elements before. Ultimately, the Nuclear Man arc could have been skipped entirely, but that didn't happen, so let's just take a look at issue 9. I actually really like this cover. The art is really pretty, and it shows the dual nature between Carol's human and Kree sides. Even though I'm not really a fan of Carol being half Kree, I thought her original backstory was fine, but this is a nice cover, especially compared to last issues. The issue opens with Carol at her family's home in Maine. She's communicating with Abigail Brand and telling her that she's stepping down from A-Force. I'm not crazy about this dialogue. I don't think it's as quirky cute as they think it is. Something I'm curious about is why didn't the comic give her a tag the way that Jessica and Tony got a tag, telling us that they're Iron Man and Spider-Woman respectively. They've both been in the comics since issue 1, and I feel like they're more well-known characters, especially Tony, but even Spider-Woman. So if you're a newcomer to comics and you're not familiar with this character, she's just kinda here. Well, there's always Google. But Rhodey's at the cabin too, and apparently he's there to keep her distracted from her troubles. She tells him she does have a distraction in mind, but it's not quite as fun as what he was thinking. And it turns out her idea of fun is exploring the sewers for clues. I'm okay with this turn of events. I don't ship Carol and Rhodey. She did get him killed for the greater good back in Civil War II. It turns out Carol planted a tracker on Minerva because she doesn't trust her, which is a good idea, but she also admits that she doesn't have a plan if they do find something suspicious with her. Despite her mistrust in Minerva, she is willing to help the Kree race who is facing extinction. The pair end up coming across a giant door that just screams evil lair. Carol decides that the direct approach is best, so she just blasts her way through it. And they end up in that place from the end of issue 5, with the Kraken hanging from the ceiling. On the one hand, it is really good to see her investigating, but on the other hand, she admitted that she didn't have a plan, and she didn't tell Rhodey that where they were going would be dangerous, so he doesn't have his armor with him, and she's in a weakened state. What if they end up having to fight? She really should be looking into her illness, or at least do that at the same time as she's investigating, because all of this could go south really quick. Carol examines the Kraken and takes this all as proof that Minerva was plotting against her, but Rhodey notices the tracker they've been following is actually on the table, with a condescending note for Carol. Turns out this was all a trap. Well, that was obvious. Like I said before, she really should have thought this through. Meanwhile, it turns out that Jessica actually recorded the fight between Carol and She-Hulk, but without Carol knowing about it. In the last issue, Carol was thinking that she needed to do something about her weakening state, but I guess Jessica just decided to take things into her own hands. I wouldn't mind seeing them communicate more, but she and Tony are analyzing the footage and they agree that something is definitely wrong with her. But Tony says they would need to run tests on Carol in the lab in order to find out what exactly is wrong with her. Jessica says if that were possible, they wouldn't be looking over video footage that she probably took with a cell phone, but it looks like she could have just talked to her. But she does wonder if this might have something to do with Nuclear Man and what happened on the island with the superheroes losing their powers. If it was that, it would at least make the Nuclear Man arc relevant. Tony says it could be, but he'd still need to examine her to know for sure. And Jessica says he might as well ask her to lasso the sun. They're just not on the same page when it comes to communication. The next page cuts back to Carol and Rhodey. The Kraken broke through the sewer and forced them onto the street. She tells Rhodey to help with civilians since there's not much he can do without his armor, but Carol tries attacking it herself and finds she's no match for it thanks to her weakened state. You know, Carol, I don't want to say I told you so, but things seem grim. Carol even worries about being killed by something that doesn't have a name. But when all hope seems lost, Star shows up out of nowhere, and she's able to take the Kraken down. Anybody willing to bet that Star's involved in all this? Carol is conflicted about seeing her and comments that she reminds her a lot of herself, in both positive and negative ways. Rhodey crawls out of the rubble and he's been injured, so he took his shirt off. You know, Rhodey's been in this comic since the first issue, but he hasn't actually been able to do anything. We never get to see him suit up and fight. He's basically just here to be Carol's love interest. Why not develop their relationship and make them a real power couple? I like it better when characters can grow from being in a relationship instead of just having one be there to prop up the other. But I digress. Tony and Jessica show up just as the action is ending. Great timing, guys. Tony comments comments about how lucky they were that Star was there, and the rest of the crowd also cheers for her. But this is Star's only appearance in the comic. It probably would be better if Star and Carol actually interacted more. That way whatever they have planned for Star, whether she ends up being an ally or an enemy, would be more impactful to the story and the characters involved. Like, what is it about Star that reminds Carol of herself? We don't actually know anything about Star. She just kinda shows up and then disappears as fast as she came. And although it wouldn't be surprising if Star did turn out to be a bad guy, she hasn't actually done anything to warrant Carol to be annoyed with her. I guess she's just upset about being shown up, but on the surface she hasn't done anything to step out of line or be rude, so it just makes Carol look like a glory hound because she's upset that everyone's praising Star instead of her. This wouldn't necessarily be a problem if it was shown as a character flaw that Carol needed to overcome, because she's clearly a very flawed character, but she hasn't really grown at all in the course of the series, and that's what makes it so frustrating. But Tony finally confronts Carol face to face about her illness, and convinces her to get help for her problem. They get Carol to the lab so she can be examined. She's nervous but gets through it. Carol asks what the diagnosis is, but Jessica and Tony tell her they have no idea. She's obviously upset by this, but Jessica notices there's a strange object in her chest. You'd think they would have noticed that right away. I'm surprised she wasn't having chest pains with that thing, but Tony says it's some kind of mix of organic material and technology, and that he has no idea what it really is. They speculate on what this object is, but then Carol seems to have an epiphany. She rushes off without telling them what she's thinking. Would it really be so bad to just communicate? Jessica decides to follow her, and she stole one of Tony's flying cars because she didn't want Carol to fall out of the sky while she was on her way to wherever she's going. I agree that Carol needs help, but I have to admit I don't agree with the philosophy of it's easier to ask forgiveness than permission. Didn't Tony want to help Carol too? Why not just ask permission to borrow the car? Would he really be against it? Carol takes Jessica back to Maine, where she reveals that she has a Captain Marvel cave set up. Carol shows her a device that looks a lot like whatever is in her chest. Apparently it's some kind of Kree weapon that was important in the life of Captain Marvel. This is why we were saying this probably would have worked better as issue 3 instead of issue 9. This story is building off the previous comic book series, which the Nuclear Man arc didn't do. Maybe they could have done this story first and then go to the Nuclear Man arc, because as is, it feels a little disjointed. Oddly enough, the next page cuts to Carol alone in Manhattan. She comments to herself about how upset Jess will be when she found out she flew, but where did Jess go? They were literally together last page. Why did Carol go off on her own after all of this? But I guess if the comic isn't gonna worry about it, why should we? She says that this all started when she got swallowed by that Kraken back in the first issue, and that Minerva must be behind all of this. She calls Tony and asks him to find that little girl who got swallowed with her, figuring that whatever's affecting her must be affecting that girl too. There was also a dog that was swallowed. That's very important. We have to make sure that dog is okay. Apparently Carol had the bright idea to go confront Minerva alone, even though she's weakened by that thing in her chest. Why would she do that? What if there's another Kraken that she has to fight? This issue proved that she's too weak to take them on one-on-one, but she just barges into the villain's lair, calling out Minerva like she's so confident. Inside she does find Minerva, but she's tied up and hanging from the ceiling just like the Kraken was, with an ominous note on the wall saying that she's not as smart as she thinks she is. Admittedly, I didn't see that coming, so props for not being predictable, but the comic was still really frustrating. Why is Carol being so reckless? She's practically going out of her way to put herself in danger. It's not like she's new at this. She really should know better. I'm confused why she decided to go after Minerva by herself when she still had that thing in her chest. Maybe she could have taken the one she has in her cave to Tony. That way he could study it and try to figure out how to help her. This comic did have story progression, which was nice to see, but the characters also make some pretty dumb decisions, and that makes me not care to root for them. She couldn't even beat that nameless Kraken alone. Now she thinks she can face off against Minerva underground? But that's our review. What do you guys think? Leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this video, you can leave a like and subscribe to this channel to see more content like this. And we'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone. Bye guys.